A hypothesis says every time you make a choice, the universe splits. Some scientists think our universe is just one bubble in an infinite sea of others. And there's a massive cold patch out there no one can explain, a mark some believe was left behind when another universe brushed against ours. This is disturbing evidence alternate versions of Earth exist. There's a scientific interpretation of reality that basically says every time something happens, the universe splits, one where it did and one where it didn't. Star Trek The Next Generation covered this in an episode called Parallels. In the science world, though, it's known as the many worlds interpretation, proposed by physicist Hugh Everett in 1957. What he meant was that when a particle could go left or right, it does both, just in different versions of reality. We only experience one. If that's true, there could be a version of Earth where every what if in your life actually happened, good or bad. It could be a world where the dinosaurs never went extinct, another where humans didn't survive the Ice Age. The idea came from quantum mechanics, where particles behave unpredictably until they're observed. Everett argued they never actually choose. All possibilities keep existing, just in separate universes. Most scientists don't think we'll ever detect these other worlds because they don't interact with ours, but it's a neat idea to think there might be endless versions of you out there living completely different lives. The most frustrating part about the many worlds interpretation is that for the longest time there was no way to test it. It's basically impossible to prove, but over the years some physicists started thinking maybe we could detect tiny effects from other universes. Back in 1995, a researcher named Rainer Plaga suggested that under the right conditions, particles in our universe might be able to pass minuscule amounts of energy to particles in a parallel one. Later, other scientists like Howard Wiseman and Michael Hall came up with a version of this idea called the many interacting worlds model. The idea is that each universe isn't completely isolated. They might nudge each other just a tiny bit, and that could explain some of the weird, unpredictable behavior we see in particles, which normally looks just random. Instead of being completely chaotic, that randomness could actually be the result of other universes subtly affecting ours, just enough to leave a faint trace in how particles act. There's also an idea called eternal inflation. So imagine the Big Bang was not a single event, but part of a constant process that keeps creating new bubble universes, each expanding in its own space. We just happen to live inside one bubble, surrounded by others we can't see. Now, if these bubbles sometimes collide, those impacts could leave marks, sort of like bruises in our own universe. Cosmologists have looked for this using data from satellites that map the cosmic microwave background, which is the faint radiation that was left over from the Big Bang. A few weird circular patterns have shown up that some researchers think could be scars, so to speak, from an ancient collision between our bubble and another. Of course, they can't say for sure, but it is a possibility. Back in 2015, a cosmologist named Ranga Ramchari found something while analyzing data from the Planck telescope, which measures leftover radiation from the Big Bang. He noticed certain areas that were 4,500 times brighter than expected. He suggested cautiously that this could be evidence of another universe overlapping with ours. Kind of like we just talked about, bubbles rubbing up on each other and exchanging material. Basically, the energy from that contact could have left behind these glowing marks. And it's interesting because these bright areas were very specific. Didn't line up with any known galaxies or star clusters. I mean, there could be other explanations, sure, but just think about how cool it would be if what we're actually seeing faint signs of another universe, light leading through from somewhere else. And that's not all on this topic. Along with oddly bright patches, they've also noticed an oddly cold spot. Scientists have been looking into it for years. They call it, see if you can guess, the cold spot. This one area is significantly colder than the rest, and it's way too large to easily explain. Some researchers think it might be caused by a massive void in space, a region where there are just less galaxies, meaning less radiation. But others have floated another idea, one that's a lot more tantalizing. That this cold spot could be another sign of a collision with a parallel universe. The hypothesis is that if two universes brushed against each other early on, that contact could have created a cooler, distorted area we can still spot today. Satellite missions like the Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy Probe and Planck both confirmed the cold spot does exist, but no one agrees on what actually caused it. So for now, one of the most logical explanations might actually involve another universe, which is pretty cool. When scientists first mapped the faint radiation left over from the Big Bang, they expected it to look like random noise. Every direction of the sky should have been more or less the same, because the early universe was supposed to be uniform, but that's not what they found. There's this odd pattern in the data called the axis of evil. Basically, some of the largest patterns in that radiation map seem to line up in the same direction, and strangely enough, that direction matches the flat plane of our solar system, the same plane our planets orbit on. In theory, that shouldn't happen. Our solar system is tiny and it formed billions of years after the Big Bang, so you wouldn't think it would have any connection to that ancient light. Some scientists have an interesting idea about this, that maybe there's some kind of external force, something beyond what we can see, that's shaping the very structure of the universe itself. Obviously, no one's proven this yet, but the fact that the pattern even exists is pretty strange. The name Axis of Evil came from how unnerving the pattern was when it was first discovered, like some invisible hand was tugging the universe in a specific direction. One thing is for certain though, this seems to go against one of the most basic assumptions in cosmology, that the universe is the same everywhere. And if that's not true, it opens the door to a lot of strange possibilities. There's also an idea in cosmology that if another universe ever collided with ours, it would leave behind a kind of wake, kind of like a boat cutting through water. The waves that spread out after are the cosmic equivalent of what might happen if two universes brushed against each other during the expansion of the Big Bang. Physicists Matthew Kleban, Thomas Levy, and Chris Sigurdsson have modeled what that wake might look like. They don't think it'd be an explosion or a visible scar. Instead, it would show up as faint, disc-shaped pattern in the cosmic microwave background, maybe even changing the way galaxies formed across space. So far, nothing's confirmed, but just the idea alone is exciting, especially when you consider this is a real hypothesis being studied by serious physicists. If they ever find one of those hypothetical wakes, that would be the first measurable sign that our universe may not be alone. One of the strangest ideas out there isn't about another universe exactly, but a kind of copy of our own, one that's invisible to us. Some physicists call it the mirror world. In this version, every particle we know has a hidden twin, so to speak, made of mirror matter that wouldn't reflect light or react to anything the way normal matter does. The only thing connecting it to us would be gravity. There could be a mirror Earth orbiting a mirror sun, or right now, completely undetectable. This idea actually came up while scientists were trying to explain the Hubble tension, a problem where different methods give slightly different measurements for how fast the universe is expanding. A 2022 paper from scientists at the University of New Mexico proposed that if a mirror world exists, its gravity might subtly affect our universe, enough to explain the different measurements. If that's true, there could be a whole hidden universe existing right on top of ours without ever bumping into it. We wouldn't be able to see it, but its gravity might still pull on things in our universe, possibly affecting how galaxies move or how space itself is shaped. In Antarctica, a balloon experiment called ANITA, which stands for the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, was designed to detect cosmic rays, high-energy particles that hit Earth from space. But a few years ago, ANITA picked up something that didn't seem to make any sense. It detected ultra-high energy particles coming up through the Earth as if they'd passed straight through the planet. Scientists had never seen anything like this before, and when ANITA kept picking up the same weird signals, scientists started throwing out some pretty trippy-sounding ideas to explain it. One was that the particles weren't from our universe at all, that they might have come from a parallel universe, one created at the same time as ours in the Big Bang, but moving in the opposite direction through time. But why would they think time would be moving in the opposite direction here? Well, the idea comes from how the math behind the Big Bang works. It's symmetrical, meaning if you flipped it backward in time, the equations would still hold up. Some scientists think it could mean the Big Bang created not one, but two universes. Ours, where time moves forward, another where time flows the other way. In their perspective, we'd be the ones going backward, of course. What does this have to do with the odd particles moving up through the Earth, though? Well, ANITA's data caught scientists' attention because the particles seemed to be moving in a way that just doesn't fit with how things work in our universe. So a few scientists suggested maybe those particles were actually crossing over, traveling from that universe into ours. One of the most basic assumptions in cosmology is that the universe looks the same in every direction. That's what scientists call isotropic. But when scientists look closely at the distribution of galaxies and radiation, there are hints that's not perfectly uniform. There's a small but obvious directional tilt. The universe seems to be slightly lopsided. A few studies have found something called dipolar modulation, meaning one side of the sky looks just a bit different from the other. That shouldn't happen if the universe expanded evenly after the Big Bang. Some researchers think it might mean we're seeing the effects of something. What? Can't say for sure, but it could mean that the part of the universe we can see is not completely isolated. In other words, there might be stuff just outside our observable universe that's massive enough to pull on galaxies inside our area. With all that said, I've been your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.